Well, good morning. Dr. Prosek has asked me to come talk to you. It sounds like you've got a project coming up where you're going to write a resume and cover letter. So I'm going to talk to you a little bit about that. My name is Kim Madison, and I am the director of the Career Center. So resume and cover letter writing is my life. I've been doing it for over 10 years now, and it probably doesn't excite you as much as it does me, but the information that I'm going to give you today is based on the National Resume Writers Association. I'm a certified national resume writer, and so they have the best practices within there, and so I'm going to talk to you a lot about what those best practices are so that you can apply them to this upcoming project. I'm also passing out right now just a resume that I'm going to have you look at, but I don't want you to flip it over quite yet, so keep it down. So, and I know that a lot of you have already written a resume or have a resume, so that's great. By show of hands, how many of you do have a resume? All right, perfect. How many of you have written a cover letter before? So a few of you. So it sounds like we might want to spend some more time on cover letters than resumes. But hopefully just through this presentation you're going to pick up some information that you didn't know that will help improve your resume for this assignment, and then also for applying for internships or full-time positions. How many of you have already had an internship? Okay, so good. You guys must be upper level students, so that's great. How many of you are engineering students? And then how many business students do we have? A little heavier in the engineering in this class. Okay. Well, to start with, I'm going to have you take a look at this resume. And I'm going to give you 15 seconds to do that. So once I say to flip it over, I'll have you go ahead and flip it over, and then I'm going to count down from 15. And then I'm going to have you tell me what you noticed about that resume. So go ahead and flip that over. 15, 14, 13, 12, 11, 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Okay, now flip it back over. And then I'm going to have you, this worked a little bit better than the last class that I did, I'm going to have you talk at your tables about what you noticed, and then I'll have each of the tables report out. So for the next couple of minutes, why don't you go ahead and just have a conversation at your tables about what you've noticed about the resume. Okay, so I'll go ahead. I'm going to start with this table over here. What did you guys notice about the resume? The academic experience. What in particular about their academic experience stood out? Multiple projects. Okay, so kind of the projects in that stood out to you guys. So when you are looking at a resume, you want to do what's called an inverted pyramid. So your most important information is supposed to be at the top. So this particular resume, they put their education, but right under there, they had some of their engineering experience. So they wanted apparently to make their education stand out a little bit. What did you guys notice at your table?
So we noticed the GPA.
The GPA. They had a good GPA,
the second
didn't they?
language. Yeah, the second language that he speaks. And some of the qualifications and the projects that he.
Okay.
Yeah.
So the GPA, one thing that you'll notice about that GPA, first of all, it was bolded. So anytime you bold something, you italicize it, or you capitalize it, it is going to make it stand out. Also, if you put space in there, it highlights that. So that's easy to find that information. If you do any of that, you're really making that information stand out. So sometimes I'll look at a resume, actually just looked at a resume a couple minutes ago, and they had all of their dates on the right side bolded. And so I was like, well, do you really want your dates to stand out? And they said, no, not necessarily. So let's not bold those then, because there's already space there, so they're already standing out. What about you guys? What did you notice?
The things they say.
Same
I've,
thing.
I've noticed his Spanish, his minor is Spanish. I've noticed his GPA, and I've noticed he has a lot of programs that he trained before. So AutoCAD, C++, Java.
Yeah. So again, back to that inverted pyramid, right? So putting those, he put those right there in his qualifications. That was one of his third bullets. So he must have really wanted that information to stand out because he put it really high on his resume. All right, how about you guys?
GPA and the qualifications as well.
Okay, good. You guys anything different?
The GPA was like away from like the school, like the academic stuff a little bit. Like,
Yeah.
and there was not a whole lot of separation. It all kind of ran together.
Of the
Yeah.
education stuff? Or?
Like arrows, like there was an arrow, but there wasn't like a separation from the next, like the next section.
Yeah. So again, that separation of that GPA, putting space there is probably intentional to make that GPA stand out a little bit more. How about you guys, anything different?
You basically have the GPA and qualifications.
Okay, so those are the big things, the GPA, the qualifications. So the reason why I had you do this is because the average lifespan of a resume is actually 15 seconds. So employers, they're looking at your resume for approximately 15 seconds. I will tell you that I'm on a search right now for one of the positions at Ambrose, and we had 70-ish applications for that. So to save time, you go through things pretty quickly. So it's really important to be strategic about where you place those items on your resume. So that's why you're going to want to put that really important information up front. Do all of you have a resume? Raise your hand if you have a resume with you today. Okay, perfect. So what I'm going to have you do next is I'm going to do the same thing, but you're going to do it on each other's resumes. So I'm going to have you go ahead and exchange your resume with someone at your table, or you might have to exchange laptops if you just have your laptop with you. But go ahead and exchange those, and then I am again going to count down to 15, and I want you to tell your partner what you noticed about his or her resume. Hopefully your partner was able to share with you some things that made your resume stand out, and you can think about if you need to change anything. And as I go through this presentation, I would welcome you to go ahead and change things as I'm talking to make it better align with what you're applying for. So, and I'm going to give you some tips and tricks, and then I will also give you a little quiz at the end to make sure that you learn something from the presentation as well. So go ahead and get started. Emily Rollins is one of our career advisors. Has anybody been in to see Emily before? She is our engineering career advisor. So I would suggest that any of you who are engineering majors that you make an appointment with her, and she can just kind of help you with your job search. If you're looking for an internship, if you're looking for a full-time position, she'll be a great resource for you. You can find her scheduling software on the Career Center homepage. And then for business students who are in here, Stephanie Gronowski is your career advisor. So you can feel free to make an appointment with Stephanie. Her scheduling software is also on the Career Center website. But one of Emily's quotes is to think of your resume as a commercial, not a documentary. So it needs to be pretty short and concise. What is preferred, according to the National Resume Writers Association, is a one-page resume for college students. So that's kind of sometimes a little bit difficult. So you really want to think about where you want to place information and how you can make certain information stand out. And other things like you could see on Donald Duck's resume that in the bottom he had a bunch of part-time work experience, because that wasn't quite as important as the other information on his resume. But still something that's important and you want to let employers know about. And so for some of you, your part-time work experience, you might want to really make stand out because maybe that is more relevant to what you're applying for or your most relevant experience. So we talked about how 15 seconds, that's the average. And then we talked a little bit already about the inverted pyramid. So you're putting your most important information at the top. How are you going to find out what is the most important information? What might be a good way to figure out what you should be putting in that top third of your resume? Yeah?
I think what's most impressive
Yeah.
GPA is really good, obviously.
Absolutely. That's a question I get a lot is, should I include my GPA on my resume? And your resume is really a marketing document. So you want to put any information on there that is going to make you stand out for that position. So if your GPA is not great, you might not include that. But if you don't include it, it is kind of sometimes a red flag to employers, so you need to be ready to talk about why it's maybe not as great as you would have liked it to be, and making sure that you turn that into a positive too. So maybe you say something like, well, my GPA wasn't that great because I took intro to engineering when I wasn't quite sure I wanted to be an engineering major. However, once I decided I wanted to be an engineering major, I really buckled down and I was able to do a lot better in my other classes. Something along those lines. So you're turning that into a positive. That most important information is going to go at the top. Another great way to find out what you should be putting at the top is through a position description. So for this particular project, you are basically telling them why you should get the project that you want, right? So let's say I was looking at some of the project problems. So one of them is electronics toolbox improvement. So it says, the description says, the electronic toolbox is used to be able to easily transport electronic components into the classroom for lab or project use. The current drawer design allows components to shift and lift easily. So does anybody have that as one of their top projects at all that they want to work on? No. Okay, I picked a bad one. But let's say that you did. What would be some of the reasons that you might want, or what might be some of the things that you would want to put on your resume to show that you would be a good candidate for that project? How many of you have taken like a design course as an engineering student? So if I saw a couple of hands raised, that might be a special project that you would want to put on your resume if you were applying for a specific problem, if you wanted to be part of that problem. So reading through those descriptions is going to be very important. Just as you would read through a job description if you were applying for a job and find out, okay, what are they looking for? Are they looking for Pro-E? Are they looking for Excel? Making sure that that information is on your resume for a full-time or a part-time or engineering internship or any kind of business internship. We kind of talked about how to make information stand out, so making it big, bolding, italicizing. And really the start of your resume, hopefully all of you have a header. Your name should be a little bit bigger on that header. So go ahead and look at your header. Another thing that you might want to do or change with your header, something that's a newer resume trend, is people aren't putting their address on there anymore. They're putting just their city and state on there instead of their full address. The reason for this is because not really anybody is using snail mail anymore, so they don't really need your address, and for safety purposes, just taking that off. The other reason why they even look at that address at all is to see if you're local or not. So if you are applying for something at home, I would use your home address for that because they'll see that you're local then. People like to hire local people because they know that they're pretty serious about applying for that job, that they're not going to have to move across the United States to get that job. So anytime you can use a local address, that's even better. Another thing that I've heard a lot from employers is that they're having trouble getting a hold of students when they have applied for internships or full-time positions. So just making sure that you have your voicemail set up, especially if you're in the middle of a search for something, and that you have your a professional voicemail on there as well. Other question that they asked in the last class was, should I put my SAU email address on there, or should I use a different email address? I think your SAU email address is very professional because it's just your last name and your first name. So that's probably what I would use, unless you're not checking that at all. Then you could use a different email address, but just make sure that it's professional. So writing those bullets, that's like usually the hardest part of your resume. So that's where you're probably going to spend the most time, is spending some time making sure that those are professionally written. When you do that, you want to talk about your experience. But this isn't just like cutting and pasting your job description. You really want to give them a little bit more than that. Because usually they'll know, like if you were maybe a waitress or a waiter, they'll know what a waiter or a waitress does. But they want to know how you did that differently than your peers. So that's where it gets to, and this is from Dick Bowles, What Color is Your Parachute? That's where it gets to accomplishments. So if you were a waiter or waitress, instead of just saying what you did, you could say how well you did it. So were you able to get more tips than your colleagues on an average night? Were you able to, were you nominated Employee of the Month? Were you promoted? Were you given more responsibility? Those are the things that they're really going to look for, and that's what's going to make your resume stand out. Also, you can talk about skills. This is oftentimes when maybe you're applying for an engineering position, but you've only been a waiter or waitress. You want to talk a little bit about how those could transfer into an engineering position. So what might be a skill that you use as a waiter or a waitress that you would use as an engineering intern?
Communication.
Communication, absolutely. So talking about how you communicate with people, how many people you communicate with. The other thing that I'd like you to take a look at your own resume is, how many things do you have quantified? Can you quantify more? So look through every single bullet, bless you, and see if you could quantify that. So for example, I was talking with a student earlier who was a camp counselor. And they actually supervised, they were a lead, so they supervised others. So they had 5 other staff members that they were supervising. That was, they just said, and supervised other staff. So that was really, it didn't stand out in her resume at all. So if by quantifying, you make things stand out more. Now, if you were just supervising one other person, you don't need to put that. Only put numbers that are going to work to your benefit, but go through each one of your bullets and see if you can quantify that a little bit more. Here's just a couple of examples of resumes. Something that I want to point out too is looking at a particular position description or the project problems and kind of looking through and seeing what exactly they're looking for and then including that in. Yeah, so you really want to think about how you might include some of that information into your resume or cover letter. So for example, in a job application, if they're looking for Excel skills, you want to make sure, and you've used Excel before, you want to make sure that that's in your resume. So you'll see even here, under computer skills in this resume, they have proficient in Microsoft Office Suite, and then they tell you every single software that they're proficient in. So I see a lot of students just putting Microsoft Office Suite in there. But there is what's called applicant tracking software. So these larger companies are going to use applicant tracking software to find certain words in your resume. And if you don't have those words, you're never going to be picked up and sent on to a hiring manager. So where you find those words are usually in the position description. The most common keyword is going to be the position description itself. So that's why sometimes you saw on Donald Duck's resume that he put entry-level mechanical engineer, design or product development. Those are most likely, that's what he's applying for. So he wanted to find a way to get those that information into his resume. The same with Excel. If they would have just put Microsoft Office Suite in there instead of listing Excel, then they lose points within the applicant tracking software. So it's so important to look at what in particular you are applying for and then making sure that those keywords and that information is included in your resume. You're telling them, why am I qualified for this position? When you do that, you want to split it up into headings. Look at your own resume once. Under your headings, you have more than 5 bullets under anything. If you do have more than 5 bullets or 5 activities, you probably want to break those up into subheadings. So maybe you have collegiate activities and volunteer work as one of your headings, and then you have 10 things underneath there. Think about when you read things. Do you read, if there's 10 things there, do you read all 10 or do you just skim those things? probably you just skim those things. So the more information you put into a heading, the less attention it's going to get. Bless you. So you want to make sure that if you have, especially with bullets, I've seen a lot of resumes where people will put like 10 bullets about something. That is too many bullets. People aren't going to read all of those. In my experience, like on my resume, I have my position, and I have a lot of bullets because I've been in my position for a long time, but I've broken those up into subheadings. So I list what I do as a manager, I list what I do for employer relations, I list what I do for career counseling. So those are kind of subheadings where I'm putting bullets in there so that people aren't overwhelmed by reading through my resume because they're not going to read all 15 bullets that I have under my title. So make sure you don't put too much information. The opposite of that is when I see a student who has collegiate activities and then one thing. It looks pretty lonely and it looks like you're not super involved. So if you can combine then with something else, so maybe you'll put collegiate activities and volunteerism together so that there's not just one thing in that section. Also making sure, take a look at your resume, make sure that everything is in reverse chronological order. What does that mean, reverse chronological order?
The most recent is first.
The most recent is first, yep. So under education, if you transferred from another institution, what would be first? Your bachelor's degree here or your associate's degree from your other institution? Your bachelor's degree goes first. Just like experience, if you're currently in a position, it's going to go first, where if you were previously in a position, that might go second. So what gets tricky though, let's say that you do an internship. You've done an internship, and then you got a job at Sodexo to make some money, because you need to make money as a college student, right? So what would you do then? Should you put your Sodexo experience and then after that your internship? So how could you still make that information stand out? I saw a couple of head nods, no. So a couple different ways you could do that. One, to make an internship section and just put your internship in there, because that's probably going to go before your other experience on your resume. You could do something like Donald Duck did, where you put related experience and then describe your internship and some of your other relevant engineering projects or business projects, and then put your work experience at the bottom there. So your heading should be easy to read. You should also have, for each of these positions, make sure you have a title, where you worked, the city and state, and the dates of employment. So you should have that for every single one of the items on your resume, and it should be in reverse chronological order. So make sure that those are on there. You can also see here how they've used a lot of numbers to make those things stand out. And they've started each with what's called an action verb. So action verbs are just to make it more interesting to the reader. I can't tell you how many resumes that I've looked at that say responsible for, and then the next line, responsible for. It gets really boring reading that. So you shouldn't have any bullets that start with responsible for. It should always start with an action verb. This is a list of action verbs on here. Definitely not an exhaustive list. If you are having trouble thinking of an action verb, you can Google action verbs and it'll come up with a lot more lists, or you could even do engineering action verbs or marketing action verbs, whatever it is that you are applying for, and it'll come up with some words that you might want to use. Also, if you can, make it as concise as possible. So look at your bullet points. Actually, go ahead and switch again with the neighbor if you can with your resume. And I want you to look for any added words in their resume, and then you're going to tell them about that. So you're going to look, one, if they've quantified things, you're going to look and make sure that it's concise. So take out any extra words like and, the. If you can take those out, you're going to take those out of their resume. You're going to make sure that they have an action verb in there, and then you're going to make sure that it's that they quantified and that it's focused on the results. So anytime when I say focus on the results, so if you're going to talk about a specific situation or task, the action you took, and the result. The result is always the most important thing. So if I was able to increase something or decrease something by 20%, that's my result. And then I'm going to tell you how I did that. So go ahead and just work with a partner, look at each other and tell them how they might be able to improve some of those bullets based on what we've talked about. So I'll give you about 5 minutes to do that. Okay, hopefully you got some good information from your partner as far as what you could include. So just some other tips to be aware of. Objective statements are kind of an outdated trend. So if you have an objective statement, I would go ahead and take that off your resume. Instead, you might want to use a summary of qualifications or profile statement similar to what Donald Duff used. If you are going to do a summary of qualifications, really you're telling them you should have a pretty impressive resume to include the qualification section, because you're really just making some things stand out on your resume. So if you don't have a lot of information to include, you're probably not going to have a profile or a summary of qualifications. You're just going to start with your academic experience. But the objective statement, the only time you'd really want to use that is maybe at a career fair where you're telling them if you're going to apply for an internship or a full-time position. It kind of helps them separate those out. Otherwise, not really needed at all. One-page limit that, according to the National Certified Resume Writers Association, you do want to just have a one-page resume as a student. If you're having trouble getting that down to a one-page, and there's students that I've worked with that I have recommended going over a page with because they have just such incredible experience that it's just not going to fit on one page. However, typically we can get it to fit on one page. So if you have trouble with that, again, that's something that we can help with, getting it to one page. Sensitive information in some countries, they will include photo, age, social security number, marital status, immigration status, all that information. In the United States, we do not include that information. And then, as I said, address, you just want to make sure you can include city, state with that. So cover letters seemed like that was an area not all of you were super familiar with. Hopefully you got the resume and cover letter packet from Dr. Prosise, so that will hopefully help you craft your cover letter for this particular project. But I will go through each piece of that so that you understand it a little bit better. So where you're gonna start, it's gonna be the exact same header that's on your resume. So you can just cut and paste that header. It basically looks like a letterhead and should match, and that way they know your cover letter and your resume go together. So go ahead and just cut and paste that right from your resume. So you're gonna have the date, and then you're gonna have the company address. So I guess for this one, you're gonna use State University, since that's kind of where you're addressing your cover letter. And then, dear Mr. or Ms. X. So for this particular cover letter, you're going to say a lot of people's names. So you're going to say, dear Dr. Romatowski, comma, Dr. Prosise, and Dr. Sunjum. And then you're going to use a colon because a colon is used in business writing, not a comma. And make sure you're not using Mrs. For this, it's pretty easy because you're going to just put doctor, but for typically you wouldn't. You would have to choose Ms. or Mr. So that's when you would maybe even call the company to ask who is the hiring manager, what should I put there. After that, you're going to have 3 paragraphs. So in that first paragraph, that's your introduction, you are going to tell them what are the 3 projects that you are most interested in working on. And then you will want to make sure that, you might talk a little bit about where you found out about those positions or why in particular you are interested for this project in those particular projects. So why you're interested in those projects. And then you're going to have a next paragraph, but you're gonna have to make sure that you're transitioning properly from one paragraph to another. So just any kind of writing, you always have transitions in there, so you're gonna use that in your cover letter. In your cover letter, you're gonna talk about what qualifies you for those projects. So what are your greatest skills in relation to those projects? So that's why I had you go through those projects and kind of identify some of those skills. So like, for example, a couple of these, like the computer lab accessibility project, you know, you're working with, you might have, if you've had experience working with individuals with disabilities, that would be something that would qualify you for that project. So I would definitely state that in your cover letter. And then maybe explaining anything that needs clarification. We want to give specific examples. So you're maybe talking about your top skills in relation to those projects, and then giving specific examples of how you have used those skills previously. And then your closing paragraph, you're just going, it's probably the easiest paragraph you're going to write in your cover letter. You're just basically telling them that you look forward to discussing that further, and you're going to reiterate your contact information to make it as easy as possible for them to contact you, to tell you that you got your first project that you wanted, and just thank them for their time and consideration. So pretty easy, and then you're going to just sign the cover letter. So you're going to have a closing, so it might be sincerely, and then you'll have 5 spaces, and then you'll have your typed name, and then in between those you're going to sign your name.
Sorry?
Yeah.
Could you repeat that again?
Yeah, so you have a closing, so it might say sincerely might be your closing, and then a comma, and then you would have 5 spaces, and then you're gonna have a typed name, and then you will, are you guys turning things in by paper, or are you submitting them to Blackboard?
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
A hard copy? Okay. So you'll want to just sign that. In between your typed name and your closing, you're gonna sign that.